I covered that Climate Hustle premiere.
You went to
in
it?
D.C. I went to it, interviewed Palin. I got on the press list and went in.
Go, man.
What happened with you? Why weren't you there? What's the story?
Well, my understanding is I was never invited. But there were a lot of stories suggesting that I had been because of the way the producers of the film used my image to promote their film.
Yeah, they had a clip of your interview playing where you were saying that there should be some consequences for climate deniers.
Actually, what I said, if you're interested, was I wouldn't be surprised that people are trying to sue fossil fuel companies for ignoring this, based on the documents, at least on the documents that Exxon had written, people at Exxon had written in 1977. Before it was ExxonMobil. In 1977, man, that's the disco era. That's when the Voyager spacecraft left the Earth. I mean, that's a long time ago.
Well, a lot of people who are skeptical about the government acting on climate change point to the East Anglia, the whole controversy with those documents. What's your response to that when people say, hey, look, this is evidence that the data is cooked a little bit?
It's evidence that people really want to find evidence. They took literally phrases out of context. One mathematician writes to the other, oh, that's a good trick for doing this analysis. And then using the word trick in a collegial way, people took that word and pretended that it was a conspiracy. And I'll tell your viewers, your listeners, whoever it is, conspiracy theories are lazy. If only there were 24 people that we could track down and straighten everything out. That's not how it is. There's 7 billion people burning fossil fuels, trying to live the way we lived here in the developed world. And the atmosphere is this thin, and that's why we're having the world warm faster than ever in history.
And I interviewed Senator Inhofe recently, chairman of the EPW committee. Now, he was saying, look, we had cold periods in the past, and then the term changed eventually from global warming to climate change.
We always tried to say global warming. We always tried to say climate change. We always said that on my side of this. You guys are looking for the wrong things. Now, what I'll say to Mr. Inhofe, I'll say to the other climate deniers that I've encountered recently, made wagers with, you're presenting information with distorted timescales. If you look at 11 years, that's too short. If you look at then the graph that Joe Bastardi published had 4.6 billion. It had reference to the tertiary, which is no longer used in geology, tertiary. And so when you look at 4.5 billion years, you don't see it. When you look at fewer than 100 years, you don't see it. So you're fooling yourself. And I think you're fooling your audiences. And you guys ought to get over it.
Well, I cover it fair. If you look at it, though, he's the chairman. I mean, he's controlling what's going on.
That's a very troubling thing to those of us on the outside. He found a snowball and thought that was evidence that the world doesn't have doesn't have more carbon dioxide than it ever has in recent history.
And not just Inhofe. I mean, you have a lot of Republicans saying, look, China, they're building up coal-fired plants. They're not de-developing at all. They're developing more and more and creating more pollution over there. The air, you can't even breathe in some parts of China. How does the U.S. lead and when other countries like that are not taking the lead at all on their own?
I say to everybody, would you want to live in Beijing right now? No. The air quality is so low. People are suffering asthma, terrible problem. Asthma is an easy one because it's sort of understandable. But the long-term problems of acid rain and destruction of the environment is going to catch up with them, with people who live there, and they're not going to stand for it. In Iowa, we get 25% of our electricity from the wind. In Texas, an oil state, 10% of the energy comes from the wind. What if we were exporting that technology and instead of trying to stop it all, instead of whining about what other people are doing, what if we were leading?
So when it comes to emissions, though, what happens if the U.S. drastically cuts emissions and no other countries do it? Is it worth the cost, the economic cost?
It's absolutely worth the cost. I mean, this is where I have solar panels on my house. I pay $10 every 2 months for my electricity. That's just fun. Okay, people in Iowa's electricity bills are lower because the wind is free. What I tell everybody is, my grandfather went into World War I on a horse. Apparently he was quite a horseman. 20 years later, when my father and my mother were in World War II, nobody did it on a horse. Nobody was fighting battles on a horse. Nobody was breaking German Enigma codes with horses. They were doing it with horseless carriages. In the same way, we want to electrify all ground transportation. We want airplanes to run on either hydrogen or renewably produced hydrocarbon-based fuels. And we want to change the world, and we want the United States to be in the lead on that.
The last question for you, is it the government's role, though, to prop up one type of energy source versus fossil fuels? Is it the government's role to prop that up, or should the free market decide when we do make the change?
So if we had the free market, look out, my friend. Is it a subsidy to have a standing army on the other side of the world to protect oil fields so we can get the kind of oil that goes in our gas tanks? Because we're running out of it here. That Algerian crude oil is not available in the United States anymore. Is that a subsidy? The fossil fuel industry has been subsidized to an extraordinary degree. Now look, I grew up with it. I mean, hey, I used to work in the oil field. I used to wash my coveralls in the greaser machines at the laundromat in Snyder, Texas, Hobbs, New Mexico. Been there. It is not what you want. It's dirty, makes a mess, and now the world's getting warmer. This is a huge opportunity for U.S. entrepreneurs. If we were to let gasoline cost what it costs in the rest of the civilized world, in Japan or Britain or France, people pay almost $10 a gallon. And they still drive. If it were $10 a gallon here, how would people, if you let the free market go on? Whoa, whoa, whoa.